Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Australian-born, Hong Kong-based musician and producer Don Kyote. He opened up about his new 2022 CD called Scatterbrain. He takes equal inspiration from jazz greats of the past and melds it with his love of hard rock from the 90s and 2000s. This melting pot of jazz, rock, funk, psychedelia, and fusion is where his new album, Scatterbrain, was born. He spends his days working as a songwriter, music producer, and engineer, and has worked with global superstars like Beyonce, Snoop Dogg, Ronson, and Toni Braxton. He's got a great story. Enjoy. Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out today. How's Hong Kong doing?
Oh, it's doing same as usual, I guess. Ups and downs, but everything's good.
Right on. Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out. Thanks for reaching out to Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk about Scatterbrain. Fire and Blood is the first track. It's coming out on May 6th. Talk to me a little bit about this album and concept and just kind of a little bit about the project.
So it's kind of been in the works for a bunch of years, this thing. My background is as a producer and studio engineer, and I kind of been working in and out of studios for like nearly 2 decades. And over that time I was working with all sorts of different rock bands, pop artists, and I never really actually got into jazz until very, very late. And it was kind of, when I did, it kind of planted a bit of a seed that I sort of revisited some old material that I'd been working on over the years, and I kind of repurposed it. So I started changing things from sort of a rock jam into a more jazz jam, and that's how pretty much this whole album came about, is kind of like fusing all the different styles that I've been working on over the years, and then putting it into new context of what my new passion was, which was jazz music. But as I say, I came to it quite late, so it has a lot of rock and alternative, feelings to the music from my earlier sort of period, and that's kind of how it came about. It's a purely studio release, and it's one of the sort of projects where there's a ton of different musicians from all over the world, but none of them recorded at the same time. No one was in the same room. Everything was all remote. So kind of like what everyone experienced during the pandemic, but I was doing it kind of a couple of years before that because I'm based in Hong Kong, and a lot of my contacts were in Australia or in the States. And so it's kind of like a remote studio project that's just sort of just been simmering away for a couple of years, and it's eventually ready to get released. And yeah, on the 6th of May, I'll be putting out the first track, Fire and Blood. And there's a whole album, 13 tracks with a couple of interlude pieces here and there. So it's a full thing. It covers all the genres from jazz to rock, fusion, funk, orchestral stuff as well. So that's kind of the vibe. Who are some jazz influences for you? It mentioned that there's some jazz greats that really swayed you. You got a lot of influences. So from the world of jazz, who influenced you? The major shift for me happened when I got into Mingus. He's the guy who kind of like really changed my perception of everything. And the one album that really did it was the Black Saint Incinerator. That album just kind of almost instantaneously became my almost all-time favorite album. And that sort of, the themes from that album, I kind of have, tried to bring into my music as well, with the different genres and the different sort of textures that he was able to provide. And just all his work, I mean, the Mingus album is like pretty much my second favorite album. I just love his stuff so much. There's a sort of a rawness and a fearlessness that I really love about his work. Besides that, the other real turning point was probably hearing Coltrane's Ascension. That one record kind of shocked me a little bit, I must say, to the point where I had to delve a lot deeper into it because it's very full on. But as I said, I'm growing up with a lot of these sort of alternative rock music, a lot of things like Nine Inch Nails and things like that, which was I kind of perceive it as a bit of they come from a similar sort of place, whereas Nine Inch Nails uses a lot of distortion, electronic equipment to create that very full-on wall of noise. Coltrane was doing it on that album just with a lot of awesome musicians. So that was another big one for me too. So you're in Hong Kong now. Where were you born and raised, and kind of how did you end up where you're at now? I'm from Australia. I grew up in Melbourne, spent most of my working career in Sydney. I met a girl in Hong Kong, and we got married, and we have a family. We've been living here for about 10 years now, so it's just purely a family decision. In my sort of day job, I work as a songwriter, producer. I do pop music, from about 10 years ago, I did a decade working for Sony Music. I was their in-house guy for a while, and it was just pure pop. I do things like songwriting trips and things like that. And I did one to Hong Kong, and she was working with a local company, and I met her, and that's how we got together. And yeah, that's the reason why I'm here. It's kind of a odd situation because my music has kind of had to adapt to being so remote. All the guys I work with back in Australia or, in the States and a lot in the UK as well, I kind of feel alone on this little island here in Hong Kong, but I've got this, pretty decent little black book of great musos who I work with.
Well, and I guess that's kind of the way the world's been since COVID began. Everything's been kind of remote, so it kind of falls into line. So with that being kind of the idea, how relieving is it to be able to have material come out where you could probably perform this live? And I guess more than that, how do you feel about the world waking up and being able to see live music again?
I miss it. I mean, I kind of went through a period when I was here in Hong Kong where I didn't really see much. I kind of didn't get out and do things, in part to some, cultural things here, whereas you don't necessarily go and see your local rock band here in Hong Kong. It's not that sort of a scene. You don't get to go to jazz clubs as much because there really aren't that many. Back in Australia, sure, everything was about, getting out to music. And so I haven't really even been able to get back to it just yet because we've only been 1 week out of our most recent lockdown here. So a week ago, we were still stuck in our apartments. Getting back into live music is something that I haven't really experienced just yet. Everyone has a perception of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are? I think I'm a guy who loves music almost to a fault, where having worked in big companies like Sony Music over the years, I would almost wear my heart on my sleeve too much, and that would impact me in the world of, commercial pop music. And I think that what I'm doing with Don Kyote is kind of the antithesis of that, in where I can just do my own music that represents me and what I really love, put it out there easily, because in this day and age it's easy to release your own music. That's, I feel, what this whole chapter is about. It's about finally getting hold of who I want to be artistically and musically, and being able to have the power to do that. Because having worked in the industry for 20 odd years, it took me this long to release my first, piece of music. I've worked on hundreds of albums for other artists, and I've written songs for people all around the world. But this is my first thing where I'm saying this is mine. I'm not saying that the music represents me as a whole, but it definitely represents my greatest passion within music. Hey, Matt, thank you for reaching out to the show. I appreciate your time today. Good luck with the album and the return to the live music. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest musicians and producers in Australia, Hong Kong, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Don for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. For everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And for everything Joe Domino related, go to joedomino.com. And if you feel like it, kick in a few bucks to the Neon Jazz cause. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.